The American Singing School. Hi, my name is Laura Diaz, and I will be presenting an informational and instructional presentation about the rise of the American Singing School from the colonial period to the 21st century. My two sources for this presentation include The History of Church Music in America, from Colonial Period to 21st Century by Ronald G. Calhoun, 2001, and The Singing of the Psalms, A Brief History of Psalmody by Richard C. Leonard. The American Singing Schools was born because when the Pilgrims came over from Europe, they came from a society that had a well-developed history of psalmody and hymnody in the church. There was in the middle of the Baroque period, and so psalmody and hymnody were already quite ornate. And they found that when they came to America, that the daily struggle to live and survive resulted in a lack of singing ability and lack of musical training in the colonies. They just didn't have the people here who could musically train the congregation to continue the level of singing that they were able to do in Europe. When they came over from Europe, they brought with them the Ainsworth Psalter. This was about from 1620, and here is a picture of the inset page of the Ainsworth Psalter, the Book of Psalms. And on the back you can see an example of notation from that Psalter. Still very much neume notation, similar to Gregorian chant. However, this Ainsworth Psalter had about 39 tunes in them. They were much too long for the people of the colonies. They were much too difficult. The long stanzas, the people would forget them, and the whole purpose of going to worship was to be able to remember the scripture and be able to apply that to daily life. So they soon began to realize that they needed to simplify things. The Puritans in the Massachusetts Bay Area in about 1630 brought with them the Steinhold and Hopkins Psalter, and here is a picture of the notation from that Psalter. Still very much the notation similar to Gregorian chant. However, in the Psalter, there were fewer hymn tunes, so people were able to learn them. The Puritans loved psalm singing. They loved singing in the church and in the home. And they also appointed a committee to translate from the direct Hebrew a new Psalter. And the result of this was the Bay Psalm Book. And you can see that here is an example of notation from the Psalm Book. Still very primitive in the neume notation. Sorry, it's so blurry, but that is from the Bay Psalm Book. And the Bay Psalm Book was based on tunes from Thomas Ravencourt's Psalter of 1621. Everything was sung unison and a cappella, and indeed no instruments were allowed because the Puritans felt that this would invoke the devil. One important thing about the Bay Psalm Book is that it introduced a technique called lining out. This is where the clergyman or the cantor, the precentor, would sing a line of the psalm, and the congregation would echo him. Now, of course, this would be good because then people who were not familiar with the tunes or the text could easily follow along. However, it was up to the congregation was at the mercy of the cantor. They could make them very ornate. Sometimes they may not sing so well, but if they were lucky enough to where the cantor would sing musically, then most often the congregation would sing musically. In churches, they realized that there was a need for musical training. People of the colonies were musically illiterate. And so a gentleman by the name of John Tufts in 1715, here's his picture, wrote a book, An Introduction to the Singing of Psalm Tunes. And Mr. Tufts is important because he introduced a new system called fa sol la singing. And you can see this is the Westminster hymn, and you can see that, I think it's backwards, sorry, that here's a F, an S, a La, and so he would put fa, sol, la, very similar to the do, re, mi that we use today, but he put it on the staff notation, and you can see in the second measure that there's a period. Well, Mr. Tufts would use punctuation to show duration. He didn't use half notes, quarter notes, whole notes like we do today, but periods and commas would show different durations. Because of Mr. Stubbs' innovation of notation, the singing school was born. Singing schools in America existed as early as 1710. This was early America's most important institution. The original mission of the singing schools was to improve worship and congregational singing. Singing schools were beneficial to the people of the colonies because not only did it offer sight reading exercises, but it also offered basic choral training, vocal technique, and choral singing. They were taught by singing masters, and they used printed manuals called tune books. Most importantly, people were given the opportunity to socialize outside of the work setting. The singing school movement grew and quickly resulted in the first school of American composers such as William Billings, Daniel Reed, Timothy Swan, Amos Bull, and most important, Isaac Watts. Isaac Watts was known for his text translations into poetic paraphrases, so that they became more of a hymn, more a beautiful tune setting. In the 18th century, the movement saw the singing schools move to the Atlantic shore, and after the Revolutionary War, the singing schools moved inland and to the south. The spread of the singing schools was aided by a new notation system called shape notes. Shape note system was first published by William Little and William Smith in 1801 in the Easy Instructor. And here you can see a picture of the book from the inset. A new method of singing of sacred harmony. Number 1, it included the rudiments of music. And number 2, a choice collection of psalm tunes and anthems. I thought that was interesting. The shape note system that they employed was called fa, sol, la, mi, and you can see it there that they would use the shape notes, very similar to the solfege that we use today. They would use the hand sign, Kerwin hand signs like we do today, and you can see on the second one here how they extended it to reach for the whole staff. They later extended it, extended it so that the fa, sol, la, you can see that, fa, sol, la, mi, fa, extended for the entire scale. This book contained hymns using fa, sol, la, vocal instruction, and even that in key signatures. So they had the primary rudiments of music theory. The shape note notation became standard in the South. The North eventually changed to the 7-note system of do to do. The most popular tune books of the day were the Southern Harmony by William Walker and the Sacred Harp by B.F. White and E.J. King in 1844. You can see the popularity of the tune books because the Southern Harmony alone sold over 600,000 copies in 1835. The Sacred Harp looks like this. Sorry, it's all backwards. And you can see how the notation is using the shape notes. And you also see that it is a separate 4-line harmony. The harmony will always be in the tenor line. Sorry, this is all backwards. And so if you were the leader of the singing, you would be singing the tenor melody. And if you were new to this, you would be singing the tenor melody. So when shape note congregations or class singing schools would practice, they would sit up in a box like this. So you can see where the altos, the tenors, and the bass, and the treble sit. And the person leading the singing would stand in the middle of the room to help lead the congregational singing. In the Southern singing school masters started to introduce folk hymn settings into the singing school tradition, such as hymns like Amazing Grace and How Firm a Foundation. In the 20th century, singing schools became more associated with the rural South. They tried to preserve the 18th century American repertoire and performance practices. There was a rise in denominational singing schools, such as the Permanent Baptist Church and the Church of Christ. And these two denominations still do not allow instruments into their worship settings. I was able to find an example of music, a tune that you would know in shape notation. It's Yankee Doodle. So let's see if we can do it. Fa, fa, sol, la, sol, so, fa, sol, la, fa, mi. So, fa, sol, la, so, fa, mi, so, la, mi, fa. So I just threw that in there because I wanted to show you some notation of a song that you knew in shape note notation. An added bonus will be a video clip from a friend of mine attending a singing school this week in Azle, Texas, of the Sacred Harp. And I hope you enjoyed the video, and thank you very much.